Hey guys, this is Johnny Richardson here, and today I'm going to tell you the history of all of the consoles from Sega. I will be telling you some facts and everything else about each Sega video game console through the years. I hope you like it. So, without further ado, let's begin. Now, in order to take a look at the Sega consoles, we have to go back in time to the year 1983 with the SG-1000. Released in 1983, the SG-1000 was Sega's first ever video game console. It was Sega's first entry into the home video game hardware business. Usually, back in the early days, Sega was a company that made games for arcades. But fast forward to 1982, Sega decided to do something that they've never done before. That is to create a video game console. And so the SG-1000 was released on July 15th, 1983, the same day when Nintendo released the Famicom system. The SG-1000 was released in several forms, including the SG-3000 computer and the redesigned SG-1002, which was released in 1984. The SG-1000 and the SG-3000 both supported a library of 76 ROM cartridge games and 29 Sega MyCard games. Today, all SG-1000 games are fully compatible with the Mark III and the Japanese version of the next console we're gonna look at. But anyways, off to the next one. The Master System. The Master System was an 8-bit third-generation video game console that was originally a remodeled export version of the Sega Mark III. It was launched in North America in 1986, followed by Europe 1 year later in 1987, and then in both Brazil and Korea in 1989. A Japanese version of the Master System was also launched in 1987, which features a few enhancements over the export models. These include a built-in FM audio chip, a rapid-fire switch, and a dedicated port for the 3D glasses. Accessories for the consoles include a light gun and 3D glasses that work with a range of specially designed games. However, the later Master System 2 redesign removed the card slot, turning it into a strictly cartridge-only system that is incompatible with the 3D glasses. Its library is smaller and with fewer well-reviewed games than the NES, due in part to Nintendo's licensing policies requiring platform exclusively. Though the Master System had newer improved hardware, it failed to overturn Nintendo's significant market share advantage in both Japan and North America. However, it attained significantly greater success in other markets including Europe, Brazil, South Korea, and Australia. The Master System has an estimated total of 10 and 13 million units worldwide. And now we go off to the next one, shall we? Alright, off to the next one. Sega! The Sega Genesis, one of the best Sega consoles in Sega history. The Sega Genesis, or the Mega Drive as it is called outside of North America, is a 4th-generation video game console. It was Sega's third console and was originally the successor to the Master System. Sega released it in 1988 in Japan as the Mega Drive, and then in 1989 in North America as the Sega Genesis, as we know it if you live in North America or whatever. The Sega Genesis was adapted from Sega's 16 arcade board, and was centered on a Motorola 68000 processor as the CPU. 30.75 million first-party Genesis units were sold worldwide. In addition, Tectoy sold an estimate 3 million licensed variants in Brazil. Majesco sold 1.5 million licensed variants of the system in the United States, and smaller numbers were sold by Samsung in South Korea. By the mid-2010s, the Sega Genesis releases were being sold by AtGames in North America and Europe. Also, many games have been re-released in compilations or on online services such as the Nintendo Virtual Console, Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, and even Steam.
"24 hours later." On December 12th, 1991, Sega released their first CD player, the Mega CD, which was a CD-ROM accessory for the Sega Genesis as part of the fourth generation of video game consoles. This CD player is very similar to the ones like the VIS or Video Information System, the Philips CDI, and the Commodore CD-TV. However, in North America, it was known as the Sega CD. Sega sought to match the capabilities of competing with the PC Engine CD-ROM system and added an additional CPU and custom graphics chip. At the time, Sega partnered with JVC to design the console itself. The Sega CD library featured acclaimed games such as Sonic CD, Lunar the Silver Star, Lunar Eternal Blue, Popful Mail, and Snatcher. Not only that, but they also featured many Sega Genesis ports and poorly received FMV games. The high price of the Sega CD was also a contributing factor in its lack of success. Only 2.24 million Sega CD units were sold, after which Sega discontinued it to focus on the console that I won't be talking about yet. The Sega CD had some mixed reviews, with praise for only some games and functions, but criticism for its dearth of deep games, high price, and lack of support from Sega. Sega's poor support for the Sega CD had been criticized as the beginning of the devolation of its brand. The Sega Saturn. Released on November 22nd, 1994, the Sega Saturn was part of the 5th generation of video game consoles and was a successor to both the Sega Genesis and Sega CD. Development of the Sega Saturn began in 1992, the same year when Sega's groundbreaking 3D Model 1 arcade hardware debuted. The Sega Saturn was designed around a new CPU for the Japanese electronics company Hitachi. This Sega console was inspired by Sony's then upcoming PlayStation, and Sega wanted to create one of their own. In fact, Sega wasn't the only one that influenced Sony. There was also Nintendo with the Nintendo 64. The Sega Saturn was initially successful in Japan, but it failed to sell in large numbers in the United States, where it was hindered by a May 1995 launch. 4 months later, before its scheduled release date, after the debut of the Nintendo 64 in late 1996, the Sega Saturn rapidly lost market share in the US, where it was discontinued in 1998. Having sold over 9.26 million units worldwide. But anyways, enough of that, off to the next one. The 32X. An add-on for the Sega Genesis that was codenamed Project Mars. It was designed to expand the power of the Sega Genesis and served as a transitional console into the 32-bit era, until the release of the Sega Saturn, which was basically Sega's PlayStation. The 32X uses its own ROM cartridges and has its own library of games. The 32X failed to attract third-party video game developers and consumers because of the announcement of the Saturn's simultaneous release in Japan. Sega's efforts to rush the 32X to market cut into time for game development, resulting in a weak library of 40 games that did not fully use the hardware, including Sega Genesis ports. Sega produced 800,000 32X units and sold an estimated 665,000 by the end of 1994, selling the rest as steep discounts until it was discontinued in 1996, as Sega turned its focus to the Sega Saturn. The Dreamcast. Believe it or not, this is Sega's final video game console that they ever made. No joke, it really is. Anyways, released on November 27th, 1998 in Japan, September 9th, 1999 in North America, and October 14th, 1999 in Europe, it was the first 6th generation video game console along with the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the Xbox. And remember when I said that this was the final game console from Sega? Well, this console ended the company's 18 years in the console market. In contrast to the expensive hardware of the unsuccessful Sega Saturn, the Dreamcast was designed to reduce costs with off-the-shelf components, including a Hitachi SH4 CPU and an NEC Power VR2 GPU. Although the release in Japan had a subdued reception, the Dreamcast had a successful US launch backed by a large marketing campaign. However, interest steadily declined as Sony built anticipation for the PlayStation 2. Dreamcast sales did not meet Sega's expectations after several price cuts, and the company suffered significant financial losses. After a change in leadership, Sega discontinued the Dreamcast on March 31st, 2001, and they even restructured itself as a third-party developer, as 9.13 million Dreamcast units were sold worldwide. Despite its short lifespan and limited third-party support, reviewers have celebrated the Dreamcast as one of the greatest consoles. In fact, it is considered ahead of its time for pioneering concepts such as online play and downloadable content. And there you have it. I know it may seem strange that Sega stopped making home consoles after the release of the Dreamcast, but at least they still make video games like the Sonic games. You know, many companies like Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo still make gaming consoles, but for Sega, well, they literally disappeared in the black hole. But many of you are probably wondering, will Sega ever go back to making video game consoles? Well, I don't think they will. But anyways, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I also want you to leave a like and subscribe if you like my video and you want to see more. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.
Yeah.